Welcome to Lucid Dreaming and the Cube of Space with the Alchemical Cabala. So in this study, we are at what are called the final letters of the Hebrew alphabet. All the final letters of the Aleph Beit connect to the interior, the center of the cube of space. So keep this in mind as you work with these currents. Our past week and two, really, we've been working with the final noon, which is the fish. And so this week, we come now to the final letter Pei. Pei means mouth in Hebrew. And what it is that through which issues the word of the living God or the living word, which is God. Can someone please read this statement from John 1? Anyone?
Sure. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. John 1.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Jesse. Okay. Here is a Kabbalistic statement taken from the Bible. So it says, man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds from the pay of Tetragrammaton. Does anyone remember the transliteration of the Yod He Vav He, which is the Tetragrammaton?
All that is or ever was, or all that is or ever was, or will ever will be.
Perfect. Thank you, Victoria. Yes. The Tetragrammaton formula of the being that always and forever was, always forever is, and forever and always will be. The word of God is the utterance of the one will, and this is the true will. So, to that, let's get right into the heart of our practice and our key for this week. The letter Pei and the tower key, which in the tableau is the key of awakening. So please just center yourself and ask yourself, what is it that is awakening? You don't have to answer it, but if an answer comes, let it come. You know, Jung said that the unregenerated intellect is one that does not perceive or recognize a power and intelligence greater than itself. So deep breaths, relax, feel your core center, feel your way into the imagery of this key. Please, one at a time, unmute yourselves and share what occurs to you.
Something I've never noticed before is that the female figure seems to be falling from behind the tower, while the man is falling from the front. That's interesting.
That is an interesting observation.
It's funny, I noticed that too. Almost immediately. That it was like the woman coming from the side or the back and the man in the front. But the thing I think the most that um, I feel like everything that's on the card is almost like illusory, like it's not even really there. And with the black windows, I feel like it's really just a black card. And all of this is just passing through.
Interesting. Interesting.
I'm getting my ivory tower of realization is being blown to bits.
Yeah, true that. This kind of reminds me of the part in the Matrix where he's choosing the the pill that'll show him the real versus the unreal. And he's like, what does it mean? And the guy there is like, it means Kansas is about to go bye-bye. It always cracks me up.
Only one of her feet is showing. It reminds me of like the Empress only has one foot showing, and Justice card only has one foot. And does the High Priestess have one foot showing? Or
Correct. And the justice, Lady Justice, has one foot showing.
Mhm.
So again, not everything's revealed.
And her crown seems to be defying gravity, unless it has a strap on there to hold it onto her head. It's you would expect the
Mhm.
crown to fall off.
Is that a jester hat or a crown?
It does seem that way, right? It's also in the shape of the crown of the High Priestess, only inverted. So we have the two crescents on the side and the full moon in the center.
In the last key, the male figure had a crown and the female figure did not.
Good observation.
This is a very grounding key, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, it certainly seems they're headed that way, doesn't it?
The falling is like, it's almost like they're falling because they think the tower is real.
Hmm. Interesting, yes.
Isn't it kind of dramatic? Like they have to throw themselves down that way?
It's pretty dramatic. I mean, I think of all the keys, it's this one is well, it's called the exciting intelligence. And for that to be given a name to one of the trumps when they're all just, unbelievably powerful, to be called the exciting intelligence is really something.
Hmm.
You know, two things stand out to me in this key. One is it's the only key in the major arcana to show 22 yods. So a yod for every one of the intelligences of the entire tableau.
What did you call them? Yolks?
The Yodes, like Yoda, like in
Oh,
Star
yo.
Wars. Yeah, YOD. That's these little shapes here that look like
Okay.
flames. Yeah,
Yeah.
those are all in the shape of Yod,
That was the first thing I noticed on both sides. I was just counting them 10 on one
uh-huh,
side and 12 on the other. But
right?
I didn't know what they were, what they represented.
Right.
There's a reference to the Tower of Babel.
Absolutely.
So what do we know about that that could tell us about this card?
Order and chaos.
Good question. So in the mythos of the Tower of Babel, let's see, human beings thought they could build a structure to reach God, right? The divine. And the they made so much progress and then their speech was confused. Is that correct? That's my recollection of the story.
It's
That
kind of like it's kind of like in what the serpent said to Adam and Eve in the garden. So you shall be as gods, or you shall be like God. And in the Tower of Babel story, it's that was the purpose. It was to elevate. Men wanted to elevate themselves to the status of God by building the tower.
right.
And there's nothing. I mean, there's nothing like the intellect. You know, it's
Yes.
when you're all intellect, you think you're God. You
But
know,
to that point, Michael, that's an excellent point. Who can tell me on the tree of life, what does this path connect?
The ode to the sphere of Netzach.
Perfect. And what is Hod again on the simple tree?
Intellect.
Perfect. So yeah, so this is the lowest horizontal path on the tree. And it connects Hod the intellect to the desire nature of victory or Netzach, right? Venus. And remember, on the tree, the four lowest spheres are basically the primary elements of the personality, right? I feel, I think, I dream, my body, all of these, as what most people identify with as their self. But above that, we've got the sun. And then above that, the crown of Ketu.
there's that part about the devil, the preceding key,
Hmm.
where I my idea of that is that the chains being voluntarily the two figures voluntarily enslave themselves to a specific shallow but specific type of knowledge, right? Like
Yes.
when you were training to be a nurse, you had to really put everything else out of your mind and not and just learn the text, right? You had to
Right.
learn the map. You had to learn the map of your profession. And when we do that kind of when we subject ourselves to that kind of training, we really have to give ourselves to it and allow
Yeah.
ourselves to be enslaved by it. It's like
Yes.
voluntary servitude or an apprenticeship. But the problem is, and this happens across the board with everybody, is that the better you learn a subject, the more dogmatic you become.
Right.
You know, this is what it is because this is what it says in the book.
Right. Right.
And one of the things that human beings are most prone to do in in that saying, is to mistake the map for the territory.
Well said.
That's like it's a point of initiation, or it's a rite of passage. And
Yes.
I say what this tower represents is that it's where the dogma has to crumble
Yes.
before you
Yep.
can actually move on, right? It's where you
Yes.
really get it. It's when you finally get it. And then
Yes.
it's like Charlie Parker. They called him the bird, the
Mhm.
saxophone player. Is a
Right.
famous quote by him. He said, because somebody asked him, he's almost supernatural the way he played the saxophone.
Sure. Oh yeah.
Somebody asked him, how do you do that? And he said, well, first you learn your instrument real good, and then you forget all that shit and wail,
Right.
you know? I think
Right.
that's what this key is. That's the point in our development of in our consciousness development, spiritual development, when that happens. And it's very similar to what it says in what they talk about in Buddhism, where they talk about the ferry boat.
Mm.
And the ferry boat is the structure that gets you to the other shore, which is enlightenment.
Yeah.
And what they say then, once you reach the other shore, you no longer need a ferry boat. You leave it behind.
Yeah.
So this is what this card is about. That's what
Yeah.
I say.
Got you.
Do they
Well
say
said.
not this, not that? Isn't that Buddhist?
Yeah,
And so that would be that key, the tower key, everything's blowing up. So it's not any of that stuff that we know. It's
yeah,
it's that past all that we know. Like
That's
it's
a
that.
right.
great point, Rachel. And I've
Yeah.
never made that connection till you just said that. It's one way, I think, from what you just said, just spoke to me, is one way to practice that is we know the self-conscious is the male, the thoughts, and the feminine is the feelings. So when the thoughts and feelings come up, we can say, not this, not that, not this, not that, until we hear the word that's coming down from the actual self or the sun up here in the corner.
Well, it's like a um, when you say not this, not that. It's when you're in meditation and a thought comes in, you say no, not this. But you have to clear. It's almost like you're flicking it out of your awareness.
Mhm.
It's like a reset button, or a little EMP, electromagnetic pulse. You blow it away, right?
Interesting.
So there's some kind of way that, and everybody has their own, a way to clear the mind screen. And it requires will, it requires willpower and force. So you have to deliberately do it. You can't just let it evaporate, because it won't. So there's and so that speaks to the violence in the card. It's a direct action, boom.
Yeah.
It's out of the mind into the heart too, is what it's you're jumping and then you're going into that heart vastness of the soul and the self that you know so it's not all that any of the worldly stuff up there. You're jumping down from that mind
I
to
Yeah.
love that. I
what's
love that, what you're saying, into the heart. Look at the shape of the largest flame in this.
mm-hmm, to heart.
Well, you look at, I think there's a cluster here, where you have the devil, and then you have the tower, and then you have the star.
Yeah.
So I think this is, not to minimize what you said, Rachel, but But I don't think this is about the head or the heart, except because the star is not about either of those either. The star is like perfect stillness. It's illumination. And it's very innocent and it's very open. So it's like I think we're really talking about the mind and how the mind gets in the way
Mm-hmm.
of spiritual realization and how it works.
In the creative force.
How do you see?
Well, I'm seeing the black, which to me is the creative force. So what we're creating, if we're using our mind, could be a bunch of stuff that has no foundation that holds us. It's just going to fall apart. It's not working.
Yeah.
Right.
So we have to be careful what we're creating.
Yeah. And what we've created here is an edifice. It's a man-made structure for
Yes,
protection
but
and elevation.
until the grace is given us to see it so blatantly,
Mm-hmm.
the mind tends to accept what it thinks it's already knows and what it has been habituated to believe is the real. Let me just share this as a possibility, okay? Just imagine, I'm not saying this is so, just try it on. Just imagine what it would be like to walk into a very familiar place with people you've known a very long time. And see yourself in that scene with several people you've known a long time. You might not know them well, but you've known them. Say coworkers. And just imagine if the grace stepped in and all of a sudden one of your coworkers goes and they pull this curtain back or they raise this blind for a window and this sun comes in. And what you see behind this curtain, you were not prepared or expecting. And all of a sudden, it's kind of like if you were a special guest star on Saturday Night Live in the middle of the skits. And the whole time in the skit, you thought, oh, this is what is. I've been in this skit for years. This is so and so, that's so and so. And all of a sudden they said, hey, look at this. And they pulled the scene back and you saw the whole background that you didn't even know was there. And it was given into you in such a way that you can never unsee that again. This is not too dissimilar to what's shown in the tower, where we've built this world and we think we know what it is because it's so familiar. We're like, oh yeah, I know so and so. They always do this, they always do that. And then the spirit of life might come through that person and say, oh, do you now? What about this? Okay, who else?
You know, I don't know so much about the card, but the story of the Tower of Babel, I know just a little about.
Mhm.
But they were building the tower
Mhm.
because they wanted to get closer to God. And they
Right.
thought if they built this tower, they could get there. And
Hmm.
so they're very ambitious about it and working together on it. But then when God realized what they were doing, um, he put things in their way that would separate them. So they weren't unified anymore. And
Right.
the story says like they put different languages in there. So
Right.
they couldn't
And,
communicate with one another anymore. And so
right.
they're climbing and they get up there and then there's mass confusion.
Yeah.
And then I look at the card and I go, that's, that's kind of the outcome because they no longer had that common um, commonality, I guess, amongst themselves. So each were going their own way and doing their own thing.
Exactly. Yes, that's the way I recall learning the story as well, Renee.
You
Susie,
know,
do you have
this
anything?
applies. This apply. I'm sorry, that this is too important. We're experiencing this right now because one of the things that the tower could represent is specialized knowledge, like I was saying before. And what we're seeing now is that knowledge across the board has been segmented. Medicine doesn't talk to other branches of science. Everybody is in their silo. You hear the term silo.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right.
And because of that, nobody can communicate with anybody anymore.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yeah. And the people in positions of power like that. They like the control of being able
They're in the
to
same boat.
Yeah,
yeah.
there's nobody in control. That's
Okay.
Right. This is
like
across the board.
mass confusion.
This is a human condition that applies to everybody, regardless
Okay.
of who you are or what your
Mm-hmm.
socioeconomic status is.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I think everybody thinks they know the best way or their way is the best or whatever. And when I look at that she was behind there, she was going to go up the back, he was going to go up the front. Didn't
Mm-hmm.
matter, you know. I don't understand the that's a sun up there, right? With the
Yes.
lightning rod.
Yes.
I don't understand that part.
The sun?
Well, was it the lightning rod that started the fire? Or
Well,
just trying to
so
connect that
in the
piece of
tradition, okay, the
mm-hmm.
very first key is the fool, and in that corner is the sun, which represents the real self.
Okay.
Okay, it's the Christ being.
This is
And
Well,
what's
let's see if we can, draw some parallel thinking in here. If the example of silos applies here, then what gets a person out of their silo? Whatever that is going to be the sun.
yeah.
What breaks you out of your dogma, right?
right.
What breaks you out of what you're absolutely sure you know the right answer.
Right.
You see?
Go ahead.
I'm going back to what I'm seeing in this is the crown is blown off. Where do you wear a crown? Your head. And then and then the sun comes in and hits us. The crown's blown off and we fall down through the arcana, all the 22, right? Past the law, right? Father, Son, Holy Spirit, and all that. And we're falling. This is what it exactly feels like to me watching this. The tower is our spine. We drop down into that vastness of finding our God self within. That vastness. It's just, and we wander there, and then we get to know our God self, whatever. But when you first learn to meditate, and the first time you drop down into that space where you're, I don't know, maybe it was me, but I found this vastness. It was huge. It was like, wow, like, and that's where I met God, you know? Doesn't it seem like it's about meditation and dropping down out, and then like your whole reality is blown up when that happens to you? It's like
Oh,
such an
yes.
is
Yes.
that what this card is about? It's what it seems like to me. I don't know.
Well, I love what you're saying because the next key that follows this is the key of meditation.
Ah, there you go. Cool.
Well, Rachel,
Yes.
it's like what you were talking about before, neti neti.
Right. Not this, not that.
Right.
And
But the
falling
important
through all of it. Yeah.
yeah, the important part of it is that neti neti is a deliberate action of the mind.
Right.
It takes willpower.
I've done that. You go not this,
Yes.
not that, not this, not that,
Right.
until you get down, 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 down. You
Yeah,
know.
you go deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper.
Right.
And you have to push that because
Mm-hmm.
that's not a natural thing to do.
Yeah.
So and I think that's why he's got a red tunic on, because red is Mars and male, he's the intellect.
And
So it's using the mind, almost using the mind against itself, right? Because when we say neti neti, you're
mm-hmm.
using awareness and consciousness to push those things out, to clear the space so that there can be nothing, no thing.
Kind of that stillness, the stillness where it is, what you're
Yeah.
looking for.
And the important lesson here is that it's work and it has the characteristic of violence.
Mm-hmm.
It feels more like awakening.
It
in my
is.
in my opinion.
It
This is
is.
awakening. This is before you've put the world behind you in the Chariot card. You're still kind of, you've got your one foot in this, and the self is what's the real part of you that's basically throwing all this down and out, saying, you're realizing it's not the real world. It's not the real world that you like. You're just kind of awakening to that point here, and it's kind of earth shattering because you're going, what in the heck is it? So this stuff is going on, but you don't really quite know what it is yet, but it's something big.
That's
It's when you
beautifully
move
said.
from the map to the actual territory.
Yes.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you. So before we're pressed for time, so I do want to move on, but I want to give anyone that hasn't said anything an opportunity to please say something about what they get from this key, if you feel so inclined.
Did anybody notice aren't her hands with her palms open?
Yes.
And his are the other way. And plus she has
Mm-hmm.
those lines in her hand.
That's correct. Yep.
But the look on their faces, I've been trying to look at their faces. Neither one of them really looks like they're afraid. They just,
Oh, they got big
to me, they look more
O's.
shocked.
The shape of their mouth are big O's. See?
Yeah, I thought it looked like they were more surprised that this was happening than.
Right.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
There's one thing I want to share.
Mm-hmm.
We were talking earlier about birds and how the sun moves across the earth and all the birds are singing in a wave. Who said that? That was anyway. I find it beautiful to think of when the sun rises, the awakening of all that speaks happens. And we tend to take that for granted because of our conditioning. But as we really look past what we've been conditioned to see and we see what's really happening, it's the same happening with our awareness as what we become aware of. It becomes enlivened before us. So this very conversation that we're having now, becomes alive even more. So we're not ignoring what we might think of as mundane or overlooking the small in-betweens of what's going on here now. And
Nice.
it's looking past our assumptions about what's happening and understanding that what we really need is always there for us immediately if we're willing to accept it.
Yes. Beautifully said. Thank you, Jesse. So who remembers the way we read numbers in Kabbalah?
From right to left.
Thank you, Victoria. Perfect. So one way of reading the number 16 is the power of 6, which is the sun, operating through the number 1, which is the magician or self-consciousness. Just something to think about. When we hear the voice, the real word of the sun in our self-consciousness, this is very often a pretty profound awakening experience for us. Anyone else before we move forwards? Okay, we're going to move forwards. So, on the cubospace. Oh, and before we move forwards, thank you all for sharing your inner vision and knowing. It's an honor to be able to share this work with you. And for those who have remained silent for now, thank you also, because I know that you're also contributing more than said. So the key that we're working with this week in the tableau, as Michael brought up, it follows the 15th key, the deceiver, in the sequence and the 3x7 layout. Now, who remembers where the deceiver current is on the cube?
On the west face.
Perfect, Victoria. It is the west below face right here. So it's moving on this below side and moving towards the south. Now, up until now, until we've had these final letters, we basically only had two options on the periphery of the cube. We could ascend up the transition key, or we could stay along the sleep key of the moon. However, final K, as you see here in the red outline, gives us another option. After we leave this intelligence of the deceiver key, of the all we see is all that is, we're able to connect to this current, and it leads us back to the center of the cube and continues on back towards the northeast above, which is the position of the high authority of the emperor and strength and love. Jason Lauderhan used to say, regarding the path in the sequence of the tarot, that you can't stay in hell forever. Now, that said, I would add that one can get lost in the imagery of the world for what might seem like forever. The good news is the tower key and this intelligence of pay, and particularly final pay, is a grace and here to help us out of all the outworn patterns that no longer serve us or serve the all. The tower key is where life itself steps in for us on our behalf and helps us to wake up and overthrow the error of all that we ignore or our ignorance. And this is why the opposites associated with the letter Pe are sin and grace. So say that again. The opposites of Pe are sin and grace. Grace of our Creator knows how to overcome every obstacle and lead us into the realm of the victorious life. As Jesse brought up, on the tree, Pe connects Hod and Splendor to victory over here. But we have to make the trek and the connection. And when we look at the simplicity of the number 16, when we add them together, we get 7, the number of victory, the victorious life. Now, this week, remember to ask the self, which in this key is shown as the sun. Ask the self to assist you to wake up in your dreams this week and follow. Be obedient to the word that you receive as you receive it. Not for anyone, any ideology, any belief system. Only do so to be true to yourself, to the self. And as you're doing your core practice this week, you can alternate this image, which shows final Pe in the tattva of fire. Alternate this each night with the tower key in your core practice. And just to remind you, the simplicity of it is to stare at this image with your physical sight. Stare at it intently before you're going to sleep until it almost seems to like disappear in front of you, in your vision. And that black letter becomes kind of glows like a white. And that red triangle kind of glows like a green. And that white square kind of takes on a blackish hue. Very potent practice for both this and the key, but you must do it. This merges your outer and inner vision. Do this with the intention to connect to the self and the living word. Wishing you all grace necessary to overcome every challenge and to let go of all that no longer serves you. Thank you for your light and participation. And do your part of the work. This may be an interesting week, working with the final letter Pe. This concludes this portion of lucid dreaming, cube of space, final letter Pe. And the floor is now open for any questions or comments.
Could you just say when you stare at that key, what color they change into, just so I have a.
Yeah, so let me stop recording for a second.
Oh,
No, you're fine.